kind of like in baseball. Yeah, we saw it a little bit last year, right? Couple games in one city. Starting the fourth, here comes Milton on the move, and he puts it up and in. Utah has gone plus 21 points tonight from three. They're plus 19 in rebounding and dominating in every way. They led by 31 a moment ago. That was their biggest lead tonight.
Dominating the paint.
Clarkson three. And picked up inside by Isaiah Joe. This is the fourth most veteran roster in the NBA of the Utah Jazz. And there's Paul Reed, who's had a couple of starts during all this. The former G League MVP from DePaul. Pascal. Mike Conley's got 7 seconds with which to work, and he gets it off to Pascal, who's out of Villanova on the move. And he puts it in sweetly for the Jazz.
That's how the ball moved. Everyone touched it. And screens being set out here for the Jazz.
Ooh, there's a bump and there's a foul. Conley was, I think his momentum carried him right into Joe, and Mike Conley's going to pick up the foul. Last 5 games for Conley, he has averaged 8 assists. Tonight, he's got 7. 8 assists tonight. He's coming off of 2 consecutive games where he only scored 6 points. Nice floater there by Milton. But Conley
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Salt City Hoops live postgame. I'm sure there are a ton of people who have stuck around to watch a 35-point blowout against a team that was missing a lot of starters. We knew that there was going to be a pretty easy victory going into it, and in a second here, I'll bring in the esteemed Dan Clayton from Salt City Hoops as well to come on and talk about it. So while we get that set up, I'm going to get Dan's video uploaded here in a minute, and we'll tweet out some links. Dan, if you want to do that while I get your video on here.
You got it.
Still trying to figure out the fastest way to do this, but I think this is the way to do it. There we go.
I mean, who doesn't want to see my tired face at 10:22 Mountain Time?
You know, this game ended earlier than we thought, right? Like, they didn't have to delay the tip because the first game ended when it should have. That was a blowout in its own right. And our game was a blowout as well. So we're here at 10:20 instead of, like, I was expecting, like, 11 or something like that. Spurs-Clippers is still going on. That is a far more competitive game, but we got some Utah Jazz to talk about. Dan, you're live on the internet as well. I was able to get your video up and going, and if I'll tweet out some links as well while you give us our first impressions of anything of value from today.
well, first of all, let me just say I'm thrilled to finally get to join you. This is your brainchild, and you brought forward, and it's a great idea and a new way to connect with Salt City Hoops listeners, or in this case viewers. I wasn't able to join you the first couple of times you did this because I was bloviating in my second language, so it's nice to get a chance to join you and bloviate in my first language for a little bit. I mean, look, it's hard to know how much to take from this game, right? The Sixers were down 4 starters, or at least high-level rotation players, right? Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, 2 all-NBA level talent. They were without Danny Green and Matisse Thybulle. So it's one of those you have to qualify a little bit. I do think that it was interesting that we got an extended look at Jazz against kind of some 5-out stuff and some position agnostic lineups, which is always interesting because we know that's true or not. We know that's a big narrative, right, about something that the Jazz struggle with, and I think they have in the past, although maybe not in the way that the narrative would suggest. So it was interesting to see that play out, but beyond that, I don't know if there was a whole lot of real predictive value here, other than, obviously it's always nice to see Boyan have a game like that, and nice to see Jordan Clarkson have a bit of a slump buster. Rudy Gobert was dominant. I just all around, I thought the right guys played really well. So much so that it was light duty for Donovan Mitchell tonight. He only played 22 minutes. I don't know. I'm probably
22 is a low number. Sometimes you're like, oh, it's a blowout. They played 25, 26. 22 tells you, oh, this got real bad.
And also, the weird rotation. The weird rotation that the Jazz use just means that the time when Donovan might have been coming back for that latter fourth quarter run, he didn't. Although what's interesting about that is the other guys usually do that last run while Rudy and Mike sit in the fourth quarter. They did come back. So we saw Hassan Whiteside, we saw Joe Ingles, we saw all those players come back for that last rotation. Donovan Mitchell and Royce O'Neal did not come back for that stretch. So obviously that means that even though the Jazz hadn't entered pure garbage time yet, that Quinn Snyder was pretty comfortable with the outcome at that point of the game.
Great. I also just fixed our echo problem that I was like, I knew I needed to fix it, and I forgot to edit it first. So I'm glad I had some comments in the chat. Got lots of folks here today to talk about the Jazz blowing out the Sixers today by 25 points. Thank you, Tyler, for hitting us up that there was an echo. We're getting used to this new live streaming thing, and I'm glad y'all are joining us to chat about the Jazz, and I know I got my extra beers here for joining you, and yeah, as far as predictive value, definitely not going to have a lot of that going forward. But the main thing I'm going to look for is if Gobert's going to outplay Drummond so badly, which we kind of knew that going in, it wasn't going to be a great matchup. What was Doc Rivers going to do with like kind of general lineups? And we saw a lot of small ball lineup where the largest player on the court for the Sixers was either Tobias Harris or George Niang, who are, I mean, even 5-6 years ago would be courteously described as 3-4s, not even 4-5s, right? And Utah did a little switching. They didn't, and that was very interesting to see Gobert guarding out in the perimeter, and they would try to put him in some actions, and you would have Gobert match up against a perimeter player, and I'll get into what they should have done more frequently, which they did from time to time, but oftentimes you had a guard going right at Gobert, and while they had more success in that style of an offense than having Drummond out there or running a traditional pick and roll with a big man, it still was a net negative offense for the Sixers. Would you agree with that? Dan, I'm wondering if I muted the wrong things here.
Nope. I just muted the wrong thing here.
Okay.
I muted myself.
I was sitting here being like, all right, do I have all the right inputs in? All
Anyone
right.
who knows me knows that I clear my throat a lot. So, because I sit here and drink Diet Coke when I should drink water. Free ad, Diet Coke. Contact me for sponsorship. Yeah. So anyway, I tend to mute myself, clear my throat, and then forget half the time to take myself off mute. I'll be interested to see when the matchup data posts. Right, that's not something we usually get right after the game, but sometime in the next 8 to 12 hours, the NBA's box score will update with kind of a record of who was guarding who at the time of the shot. I'm really interested to see that. I think to my eyes, without having that data yet, it looks to me like Gobert was very aware of the narrative and aware of who was on the court from the Sixers standpoint, and that it was an opportunity to make a point about his ability to guard in space. I just every time he was guarding in space, or anytime his man had the ball, he was very locked in. Then the Sixers would run these little dribble pitch actions, which are a really smart way if you're trying to see, if you got a big guy guarding out on the perimeter and you want to test his mobility a little bit, that's a good way to kind of get him leaning one way and then bring the ball back the other way and make him move. And Gobert was just sniffing all of those out. He was really good. He was superb tonight. He also had a couple of those moments that you talk about a lot, Mark, where, because he's big and long and gangly, if he does kind of get turned around a little bit, or there was one play where Steph Curry kind of juked him and then stepped back into a shot, and like, because he's so long and kind of Gumby-ish, it's like those movements are exaggerated and it looks maybe worse than it is.
He also tries, right? So I think a lot of big men in that situation, they stumble, they stopped, and they'll just say, all right, you have your open three, and he will try to.
And by the way, the shot I'm referencing, Mark, Seth Curry missed it. So again, it's like, are we judging based on how things look, or are we judging based on outcomes? But yeah, I thought he was really good. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's the whole intent. A free-flowing conversation aided by lately caffeinated diet beverages and An uncounted amount of beer. Speaking of Seth Curry, horrible game for him tonight. There were several instances where he did try something to do with Gobert. To Seth Curry's credit, a lot of time he didn't completely all the way try a futile shot attempt. Speaking of kind of like aborted shot attempts or figuring out how to do something differently, and maybe if Gobert's gangliness helps him in this situation, he got Gobert on a pump fake, drove by him, and he found himself at the free throw line. And if he's a little bit taller or has a little bit more rise in his jumper, because he's a Curry, he doesn't really have a total lot of rise in his jumper. He's kind of like a quick flick shooter. He found himself getting ready for a shot attempt, and Gobert's awkward longness had his hand in Seth Curry's face before he even had the ball up over his face, and Curry had to pass it out. And I think that eventually ended up being an easy bucket drive from Maxey driving on Clarkson, if I'm remembering the right play. Which brings me to the second point, which is if you have a situation with a 5-out lineup, the idea isn't to expose Gobert with your C-plus ball handlers. The idea is to get another C-plus ball handler the advantage he's been looking for against the Utah Jazz plethora of D-minus defenders, where Gobert is not in the paint, kind of sealing off his man, getting ready for a rebound, and can help. He's out guarding the free throw line for a jumper. That is how the Clippers exposed Utah in last year's playoffs. We can go on a whole tangent about what they could have done differently, if you could have deployed Gobert differently. But the idea is, if you're going to do a 5-out lineup, it's not to expose Gobert, it's to expose everyone else. And the Sixers were able to do a little bit of that.
Clippers.
I'm sorry?
I said Clippers.
Yeah. And they're just the Sixers just didn't have enough talent across the board. Like you would have a wide open Shake Milton drive. Maxey definitely had his moments against other defenders, but those guys aren't going to scare you, right? I mean, it was pretty much make sure Seth Curry doesn't go off. Korkmaz can pull off a 30-point night, and he's got some crafty moves around the rim, but he's just not good enough, right? Like you're not scared of him doing a lot of different variety level of 3-level scoring. So it's like, okay, he draws a foul on Gobert, you don't mind. There's just not enough talent there today. But I thought it was really exciting that Gobert wasn't matched up against these guards on a situation where the defense couldn't recover in time, so Gobert found himself on an island, and you just have to live with it. They were intentionally doing that, and I was very pleased with the results, because I just lamented Philly's lack of talent a little bit. But when you get to the playoffs, I mean, not every team is going to have 5 primo ball handlers. And if you end up if I look at that Clippers team again, right? If you end up with a situation where Reggie Jackson thinks that he can take on Gobert, that's a win of a possession for Utah, regardless of what the result is. The process of having Reggie think he can take on Gobert one-on-one is a net win for Utah, however that shakes out. You're going to get a lot of those B- to C- level ball handlers finding themselves on Gobert and thinking that they can take him on.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things there. Number one is you're absolutely right. Like the Jazz's defense is better if Rudy Gobert can be involved in the defensive possession. And there are teams that run 5-out understanding that, and understanding that it's about denying him an opportunity to get involved because you make him be somewhere where he can't impact the play the way he wants to impact it. And then there are teams that think, and look, there's this whole learning process that guys in the league seem to have to go through of, oh, Gobert's on me, I'm going to do the pass across the top so I can get it back and just go to work against Gobert. And usually those end badly. Not universally, right? Like we saw Kyle Lowry get Gobert on a pull-up 3 the other night. Chris Paul tends to do pretty well on that particular switch. I mean, there are guys
in the mid-range too, because Gobert, for all of his athleticism and his length and his gangliness, He can shut you down for three, and he can recover on the layups. But Chris Paul can get to that mid-range, and Gobert, he has the speed, but not the acceleration necessarily to get to that mid-range, and Chris Paul can eat in that mid-range all the time. That step-back three by Lowry, that's just something you're going to have to live with.
Yeah, and frankly, that the same is true of a lot of those mid-range pull-ups, right? Like Rudy will concede some of those because he's more he doesn't want to get faked into a foul at 15 feet when he's more focused on getting to the restricted area and shutting that off. So anyway, all these guys go through that sort of learning process of thinking, oh, now, licking their chops and going, oh, the big guy's on me, and then finding out the hard way that this isn't just your standard NBA big guy who's plotting and who can't stick with you. That's why I tweeted early in this game looking at who was playing. And this is less true of Seth Curry because Seth Curry used to play in the West and has seen Gobert plenty of times in his career. But I was looking at who was playing and going, wow, Gobert might get some new guys he hasn't gotten yet because some of these Tyrese Maxey, even Furkan Korkmaz types just haven't had that learning opportunity a whole lot yet. And sure enough, he got two new guys added to his graveyard, or whatever we're calling it, his block list. So yeah, I mean, totally agree with you. I think the Jazz understand that. The Jazz understand, and the other thing the Jazz understand is, look, in a vacuum, if the Jazz got to pick how they wanted to play every trip down to their defensive end of the court, they recognize that, like, look, their defense is still better when Rudy Gobert is close to the paint. It's just when you're in situations like this where you don't get to make that decision because of the lineup that the other team is playing, how adaptable can you be? And again, I think what Rudy has shown over and over again, including in the Clippers series and then again tonight, is that he's not the problem with those configurations. He's not the reason why the Jazz have not been able to or have periodically struggled against that type of configuration.
Yeah, and to be clear to the comments, I think we have the audio all figured out, and if you have any comments on further audio, just drop a comment, and we'll fix it ASAP. It's usually something on my end. Whether Rudy's good enough to guard these lineups is without question. I think besides the gangliness, what also could look bad is. Again, go back to the Clippers series when they're at home, the crowd's going wild. The ball gets kicked out. Reggie Jackson blows by a Gimpy Donovan, kicks it out to Terrence Mann, and Rudy is taught. He's coached by Quinn to not close out on Terrence Mann. You are better at letting him shoot the wide open three and grab the rebound. Those are the types of things where it's like, well, maybe Quinn should have adjusted to have him give a token closeout because Rudy's good enough to still get back in the picture for a rebound. Those are those slight coaching tweaks that aren't Rudy's fault, because he definitely was capable of closing it out. Maybe you have whoever's guarding the wing three, show to the ball, go guard Terrence Mann, and Rudy now is going to guard the elbow, right? Whoever that shooter was, whether it was Luke Kennard or even Paul George or Nick Batum. We go back to this Clippers series all the times as painstaking Utah fans, because of the way we lost is going to be ingrained in our memories until we die. It's not just losing to the Clippers in 6, it's the way we lost. We're going to talk about it all the time, especially when you get a few beers in, you're going to talk about how the fuck they lost to the Clippers in that series. So, but then you kind of take it in like a microdose against the Sixers when that's kind of who they have to play, where Tobias Harris is your Paul George and Tyrese Maxey is your Reggie Jackson. And it's like a neat little training camp to kind of see like, all right, well, what are they going to do? And we saw a lot more switching today. To that end, where you say like Gobert is not the problem, and you don't acquire a Rudy Gay type and to replace Rudy Gobert in your closing lineup. That is not the point. However, right. I did think it was interesting to see how Hassan Whiteside played in about 5 to 7 minutes I saw today, where, again, Philly's forced because of personnel to play a small lineup, and Hassan Whiteside was out there. And there were a whole host of defensive miscommunications out there. We could hear the audio on the TNT audio of Hassan barking at either a Trent Forrest or a Jordan Clarkson. And given that Hassan is new to the system versus Jordan Clarkson's defensive adventurousness and Trent Forrest's newness, it's hard to say, like, okay, who's at fault. But I thought it was very, very, very interesting when TNT does those, like, coach's audio, I think, like, mic'd up or whatever. Very rarely you get some real insight. But in between the first and second quarter, you heard Quinn telling his team, hey, quit looking to the bench for your defensive assignments when they go small. Just communicate amongst yourselves. He told them, you guys figure it out amongst themselves. So I don't think any one of Hassan or the guard who he was talking to was at fault. I think it was them trying to figure out, okay, who's responsible for guarding these perimeter players, and they didn't figure it out. I do think having Rudy Gay back, if you can put him in place of Whiteside, if Whiteside and the guards don't figure it out when Gobert's not on the court, well, put Rudy Gay out there and switch everything.
Yeah, or frankly, I mean, I think we've seen enough encouraging things out of Eric Pascal to think he might be an option as a small ball five in certain situations. Not if you're looking for him to be the anchor big that Rudy is and that Hassan is in the non-Rudy minutes, but if you're going to switch everything anyway, and you're not looking for like a last line of defense savior for you, I think you can get away with Rudy Gay or Pascal.
Problem is, like, Whiteside doesn't have the speed to get back and, like, contest those at the rim shots, even if you are kind of doing a switch everything style lineup. Like, he doesn't have Gobert's speed on that. I think you're looking for the offensive edge with Whiteside.
I think, yeah, as soon as Whiteside gets 2 feet outside of the paint on a help or showing on a pick and roll, you're kind of in trouble. And I mean, I don't say that. I'm not trying to throw Hassan under the bus. Obviously, he's been a positive overall, and I think he's surpassed most people's expectations. But that's just a situation where that's not his strength. But yeah, I agree with you. Just now they have options, right? They have some options they can work through. It's one of the reasons why, along with tonight, which, I mean, you said it, Mark. It's tonight was a situation where, yes, they were facing, like, philosophically speaking, that type of team, but there just wasn't a talent level. That's why I was kind of interested to see what happened in that Denver game after Nikola Jokic got hurt. Hang on, let me rephrase that because it sounds like it sucks that Nikola Jokic left that game. But
cooking until then, by the way, he's a brief tangent in honor of Jokic. He's gone from a matchup that Gobert fans and defenders can say, like, no, I think we have him. It's like when Jokic was playing against Favors or some other defender that he actually was getting his points. Jokic has evolved to take on all comers, including Gobert, and I was excited for that. And he was cooking until that point.
I agree. I'm going to respond to your tangent with my own tangent, and then we can find our way back to the main thread of the thing. The one thing I will say about Jokic being guarded by Gobert in the last couple of seasons, and including that 2020 playoff series, right, is I think that the Jazz, because they employ Rudy Gobert, they get to make some choices that other teams don't get to make. And one of those choices is, hey, we're going to play Jokic straight up. We're going to put Rudy on him. We're going to know that he's going to light Rudy up, too. Like, he's going to score against Rudy because he's an MVP and he's that good. But we're not going to send 3 extra bodies at him and, let him have one of those 12 assist nights, because I think what the Jazz have decided about Jokic, at least historically, is that Jokic, the passer and the unlocker of their whole offense, is a more dangerous player than Jokic, purely the scorer. And the other thing I'll say in Rudy's defense is, while Jokic does still score on Rudy, he almost never takes Rudy inside. He's almost always picking and popping, or faking a screen and then stepping. He likes to stay
or hitting impossible shots, right? Like those
sure.
those 4 pivot, 3 pump fake hook shots.
Yeah. And again, we're talking about the MVP. Like, he's a crazy talented player, and it should not be a slight for anybody to say, oh, the MVP went out and got 30 on you, right? Or in the case of this last matchup between the two of them, hey, he had 25 at the half and then had to leave, or whatever it was. It was 20-something.
But you're right.
So,
when he left the game, it kind of presented like, okay, so they have JaMychal Green and Jeff Green types, but are they? I mean, again, those are kind of fours types. I mean, JaMychal Green's kind of a 4-5, but yeah, it might have been interesting to see how Rudy was deployed in that second half, and then the game kind of got in hand.
So for me, that was a slightly better test of how Utah. And remember, the Jazz were down 2 when Jokic left. It was still a competitive game. They struggled for the first few minutes against those smaller Nugget lineups, and then kind of got their crap together and figured it out and pulled away. So, again, is Denver without Jokic, or is Philly without half their regular rotation the best place to judge and gauge and say, oh, the Jazz's 5-out demons are fully exercised, go back to dominating? No, these are not perfect tests, but I do like that we've seen the Jazz get engaged by a couple of those types of teams out of necessity. And now, the next step will be when they face a team. I mean, frankly, like Orlando, even though they play with big guys, but they play with stretchy big guys. So they play some 5-out also, and the Jazz struggled with that, right? So, as is the case in basketball, there's no final verdict, right? Like you can do things really well for 48 minutes and you still have to show up and play the next game. So nothing's proven in either direction, but these have been, including tonight. I just think, talent level aside, I liked how little confusion there was during the Rudy minutes about like, no, we're not switching it. We're not. The Jazz made it clear they were not going to adjust for Gobert in those settings. That Rudy Gobert, they were going to switch, and Rudy Gobert was fully functional in those switching lineups and that switching scheme, and I thought he did a great job. So,
and they didn't do it right away either.
Important.
They were a little bit fluid in when they deployed it. I think they were. I'm again. You got to look at the tape a little bit to see exactly when it started flying out, but it wasn't as if Drummond was immediately out of the game and then all of a sudden Gobert was guarding Tyrese Maxey. I think they were still being selective on when the guards could push over and get past the screens. But at some point they kind of just said, fuck it, Gobert's guarding on the switches. And I don't think it was immediate. So I think they were a little bit malleable there. I think what I'm looking for out of the Jazz this entire regular season, besides a 1 or 2 seed, is I kind of want to see malleability for malleability's sake, which is not something I would say 3 years ago when the team is really starting to figure out their stardom and who is the source of the offense. But I want there needs to be a purpose to it. I don't want to say like, oh, just I kind of loathe how Tyronn Lue kind of throws spaghetti at the wall and kind of tries to see what sticks, and all of a sudden he finds something. I like them to have a little bit of a purpose to it, but I would like them to say like, well, okay, what happens if we do this? And I thought today was great for the first time I've really felt comfortable all season that Quinn is ready to say, all right, yeah, 5-out lineup with these level of ball handlers, I'm going to put Gobert on the switch. And I know we've talked 25 minutes plus about Gobert guarding switches, but it kind of is the main story today.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I was just while you were talking about that, I was looking at Popcorn Machine for tonight's game to just kind of get a rough visual.
Oh, is it already up?
Yeah, just to see like how many of Drummond's minutes were matched up on Gobert, and you're right. Like, I think Doc tried for a portion of the game to keep that matchup there, because I mean, what other options do you have? But yeah, they were. Let's be honest, they were kind of silly a little bit. So I mean, Drummond just couldn't hang with him. But yeah, I mean, of course, that's what we're talking about, and to your point about malleability, like there are a lot of different ways that'll play out over 82 games. I still think and this maybe applies more to the offensive end, because I had some people telling me the other night that like, oh, the reason the Jazz suddenly just don't move the ball anymore and don't run these, layered actions and complex play sets, and they instead just come down and like set a screen, and then whoever has the first shot just takes it no matter what. The reason they're doing that on offense is so then they can kind of build a different set of muscles so that they have something else they can fall back on in the playoffs. And I don't necessarily agree with that level of just throwing crap to the wall experimentation, only because when the Jazz they were on a 59 game pace last year, right? They were elite. Like they weren't just the number one seed. They were the number one seed. I mean, they were an elite team. And I don't think the way you respond to being elite is to say, hey, we're going to become more elite by abandoning all the things that made us elite. And that's one reason why I was glad to see them get back to, the blender tonight, and to running an action, not just like to give somebody a look at a 25-footer they could hurl up, but running an action so that they'd go into the next action already with an advantage. And then once you do that 2 or 3 times, the defense just has no choice. And so yes, agree with you about malleability. I would like them to do that and to search for that within the context of who they are and what has made them special. And tonight felt a bit more like that for me. I think they had 25 assists again, which again is 28 assists actually, which assists isn't the perfect measure because you only get assists when the shot goes in, right? So assists.
And I think there's a what the blender, if you will, speaking from a top level, can do is get you those open or open-ish shots from 3 that you can be dumbfounded that they're not falling, right? And Bebop in the comments is saying, like, is this the Wilson ball, right? Is this contributing to the shooting woes? Offense is down across the league, so you got to say, like, well, there's no way that it would be statistically impossible for the ball to affect just one team, right? It would have to be a league-wide sort of like, sorry, I'm going nerd on a very qualitative thing. I'm like, what the Wilson ball can do, but it's impossible for it just to affect the Jazz. But that being said, whether it's the ball or not, Bogdanovich shooting 5-7 from 3 today, a lot of those were great looks caused by great offense that were getting him the ball with a guy who was 5 feet plus from defending him. Say what you will about Bogdanovich's hot streaks or not, he doesn't have a shot profile like Jordan Clarkson. He shoots the ball when he's open, or if he's just kind of like feeling a little bit of a light contest. He does not sit there and dribble and shoot it in the face of guys. There's been some times we've seen some like fuck you bogey kind of things, but it's still like one dribble or catch and shoot with a guy in his face. It's not like he has a very regimented 3-point shot profile that if he's gonna shoot this poorly, you're gonna get a 5-7 game. Now I love a 5-7 game against a team that doesn't suck, but the types of shots he was getting today, he gets those against the better teams as well. If the rest of the team is playing better offense. Wilson ball or not, I don't know. I haven't actually touched the ball or not, and I can't say I'm an expert in tactile experience of basketballs. But there's lots of conspiracy theories that are fun to talk about. I might need like hard liquor to talk about that one.
Yeah. Personally, I don't dismiss the ball entirely. I think a lot of guys are about rhythm and habits and that sort of thing, and something like that can have an impact. But again, most of the league has sort of come around, and most of the Jazz players have come around or are coming around, right?
Do we know when the teams had access to them, like for off-season workouts? Could like Donovan play with it?
I believe they had them all summer long.
Yeah,
is what I've read. So, on top of that, there are some other things at play. In fact, our guy Ben Dowsett wrote some stuff about this for 538, where he pointed out, one of the things to keep in mind is generally for the first 2 to 3 weeks of a season, there's always lower shooting percentages than what that season will ultimately produce. Then there's the rule changes.
From different levels, what have you, because what I want to poke at is just like with Utah's very structured shot profile, does it hurt them more with their volume of 3-point shooting versus a team like the Nets or the Suns, or more comfortable in the mid range, and your shots can have a little bit more variance because the ball will go in more frequently than from three.
Yeah. So yes. So yes, at the level of 3-point shooting, if you look at 3-point shooting for the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks of any season compared to the league average at the end of that season, you'll see some significant variance, right? Now I don't know how that variance compares to the mid range, how that whatever. There's also been the rule changes, and I think that has had as much of an impact on guys' shooting percentages as the ball, right? Because now you're players who are used to leveraging contacts to get a certain call at the 3-point line and just throwing up the ball in the general direction of the hoop because that's what they need to get to the free throw line. Now, that whistle isn't coming, and now that ball.
Now you just shot like a 6% shot.
Yeah, actually, now that's actually counting on your percentage, right? So I don't know. I think there are a lot of things. Frankly, I've played basketball with, never at an NBA level. Don't get me wrong, but I've played basketball.
You're kidding.
Yeah, this just in. But I've played basketball with capital S shooters, and halfway through the run, someone's got to go and they got to take their ball, and then we play with a different ball, and whatever. Maybe it takes them a couple shots to get used to the new ball, and then they're right back to drilling shots in my face or whatever. So I don't know.
Or whatever.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that I don't know if Tyler Crandall's still listening in, but the guy I'm talking about is Steph from our Brooklyn runs, and it doesn't you could switch it out for a bowling ball, he'd still make that shit in the after a little bit of adjustment period, and I have enough respect for NBA players' skill level that I have to think that months into having access to this ball, I can't imagine that that's still the reason why anybody just can't get it going.
Yeah, and Jordan Clarkson in particular, just to highlight,
you're really trying to bait me into a Jordan Clarkson.
No, I just want to comment on something because I'm in the top 10% of his defenders, right? As far as the value he brings to Utah as the kind of quality player he is right now.
Yeah.
But I have his shooting woes and his relative success recently. I have noticed that dating back to his cold streak at the end of the regular season last year,
mm-hmm.
I'm not sure he has the crazy shit shot profile that he exhibited at the start of the season. That I thought we were seeing this blossoming into a guy who it was a Steph Curry light level of he's going to shoot wild shit and it's going to go in way more often than it ever deserves to. And he's going to create that kind of pressure. If he's going to go 4 of 12 from 3 like he did tonight, well, he might go 7 of 12 the next night, and he's still going to shoot these wild shots. And I'm now starting to come around that he is a great, difficult 3-point shooter, but I don't think the wild shit is in his bag anymore. And his makes come difficultly. They're still more difficult attempts, and they still put the right kind of pressure on the defense. But they are still more set than when he dribbles around. All of a sudden, he's fading away. He was given a couple hand grenades tonight, I will say, where he was given the end of shot clock shots, and he's the best person of anyone to take them. But I've started. I'm not saying I'm all the way there, but I've started to sour on his wildest shots.
Look, so I'll take this opportunity to clarify my Jordan Clarkson position verbally.
Have at it. Yeah, I want it.
Because I'm more like I think people have interpreted some of my Jordan comments over the years as being far more bearish on him than I actually am. I agree with you. Like, look, most really good teams have a guy or two who are just possession eaters, who have middling efficiency. Now, right now, Jordan doesn't have middling efficiency. He has terrible efficiency. But like, let's just like rewind to last year's Jordan Clarkson, the not the red hot start to last year, but just kind of like average Jordan Clarkson, who's using possessions at like around league average for per shot efficiency and all that. There's value in a guy who can use a bunch of possessions that way and take pressure off of other guys and make it so that, you know, Joe Ingles doesn't have to use 25% of the possessions when he's on the floor, even though he's involved as a ball handler and whatever. So my criticisms of Jordan Clarkson, I have no problem when he misses shots. Let me put it that way. My issues with Jordan Clarkson are usually because one of two things is happening. Either miss or make. I don't like it when he's the only player touching the ball on offense for multiple possessions in a row, right? I think that those lineups, those hybrid bench starter lineups, have proven so potent and so good that there's no reason why Jordan needs to control the ball for 5 straight possessions.
So in other words, there's always going to be a time for a Jordan fuck you possession. Like, I got the ball, I'm taking this guy one-on-one. But the next time down the floor, it's not like he's the only ball handler out there. Like, even give him a break, right? And have him go on and off. Like, okay, this is a Jordan possession, and maybe this is not. But 5 in a row is maybe too much.
And not even in a my turn, your turn sort of way, but like, look what happened tonight when the Jazz just decided to get Joe Ingles a little bit more involved in the ball handling. The guy had 4 assists in his first like 9 minutes on the court. Mm-hmm. And by the way, on a night that he looked like 70 years old too. Like, he didn't, like, Joe's game didn't look fluid. It's just that, like, he's good enough and smart enough that when you invest possessions that way and just run a set, right? Like, that's my thing. Like, I just, like, there are stretches when Jordan's on the court that I'm like, guys, just run a play. Just run any play. I don't care what it is. Like, just try running an action and see what that yields.
And Jordan doesn't need that much time to do an ISO possession, right? If you run a play and it all breaks down, hey, 6 seconds left on the clock. That's a lot of time, man. Have at it. Yeah,
or more often what happens, and I wrote about this. When did I write about this? I think it was in last week's Salt City 7. The possessions where it's like quick pass, another quick pass to Jordan. Jordan isn't ready to make the decision on the catch, so instead he like dribbles backwards and like has to think about what he's going to do. And now it's a Jordan versus 5 possession when it was a possession where the Jazz were trying to generate an advantage. And now any advantage they might have gotten is lost, and you're just back to. So again, that's more my issue with Jordan is like when other 4 guys are trying to play advantage basketball and Jordan is just like, no, it's cool, I got this. Even like regardless of whether the shots go in or not, because like I say, for me it's not about the misses. He's had games where he's played really well, and I've still been bothered by just how little he's allowing other players to impact the offense. And then my other big complaint about him, and I'll be quick on this one because I don't think I have to convince anyone on this one. Like, he's not a plus defender, but there are nights he is really, really bad.
It all depends on if he gives a shit or not.
I mean, like Saturday was a game that he had that amazing 14-point first quarter and kept the Jazz within striking distance when they had no business being in striking distance. And then for the rest of the game, I swear it was like someone had challenged him to see if he could like somehow give all those points back. He like guarding behind Kyle Lowry and got beat backdoor like 4 different times. And whatever. Those are the things that Jordan Clarkson needs to clean up. If he's playing the right way, he can put up 20 shots in, and I don't care how many of them go in, because I get that here's the thing. I get that what Quinn Snyder is searching for with Jordan is the fact that if you let him go hunting for that, occasionally he's going to have a night like that second half in Atlanta. And when Jordan Clarkson gets like that, the Jazz are unstoppable, right?
Yeah.
They're almost unbeatable. Like, if you look at their record this year and last when Jordan has, like, say 14 points or more, go look at their record when he has that versus when he doesn't. The Jazz are unstoppable when Jordan Clarkson gets it going. Right now, I think they're searching for that a little bit too hard at the expense of other guys who, frankly, like, you know, at this point you could throw a possession almost anybody else's way and get more out of their average possession than you're getting from Jordan. But look, they're trying to get back to that second half in Atlanta, Jordan Clarkson more often. And that sort of high, that makes them really good.
The high variance player. And when you think about Jordan Clarkson at his lowest, Utah can still win a majority of the games. If Jordan Clarkson is at his lowest, can Utah win a majority of second round or Western Conference final games?
Sure, if they respond to that by pulling it out and putting the ball in Don and Mike and Joe's hands more.
No, I'm assuming like the same level of minutes, the same level of shots. If you're getting like the lowest of the variance, like how many playoff games can Utah win? I'd say probably 30 to 40%. But
yeah.
And that's if he's exclusively playing 100% every single game at his nadir. If he gets enough games at average and gets enough games at his zenith, right? That's a type of variance that you can say, well, we can win enough games, 1 out of every 3, perhaps, when Jordan plays like shit and he can't shoot the ball and he can't defend. That the games that he absolutely will be average or way above average, we're guaranteed to win those games. That's sort of like, well, that the expected value of that is like, we're going to win these playoff series.
Right.
And Jordan Clarkson was absolutely not the reason. He might have been a contributing factor in some things, but he was never a plurality or a majority reason why Utah lost the games that they're over the past 2 years. Absences have been the issue. And my central point, though, just going back to the earlier, I have started to sour on some of the shots with 12 seconds left on the shot where he's got like just it. I love his off the dribble threes, but there are some times where he takes an angle into a shot that's like, that shit ain't going in. And at the beginning of last year, you got to like January, you're like, this guy can hit those shots all the time. And by May, we were saying, I don't think he has it anymore. And starting in this year, he definitely doesn't. So I'm back to where I was at the beginning of last season, before we even played a game before last season, where I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about Jordan Clarkson's ends of his shot profile. I love it when he gets a little bit more of a rhythm. He shot a couple threes, catch and shoot in a guy's face. I think he's got the skill to do contested threes. I don't think he's got the shoot it over 2 people fading away to his right shot. In lieu of other offense, to your point. That's all.
That's my deal, is the Jazz have enough ways to end a possession efficiently that I'm not sure that someone with a 540 career true shooting mark should be using 35% of their possessions when he's on the floor, right? So for me, it's just about allocation. Now, again, like a lot of it comes down to how those shots are coming and whatever. You will never hear me complain that he missed. Or that's actually not true. You probably will hear me complain about his shooting percentage, but like I get it. I get that you're playing the numbers game there.
Well, Tony Jones brought up a good point today where he said, I think, the same ethos that I was getting to was, I can't remember if Tony said that he preferred or what his verb was, but he said, I'm starting to like Jordan more as a driver when he gets into the paint. And because, and Bebop also dropped a comment that JC's passing has been a little bit better this season. I don't know if it's been better this season to last, but I will note that when Jordan gets in the paint, all of a sudden, like, his passing becomes, like, it like elevates. His skill at passing gets higher the closer he gets to the basket. He's got these wild interior passes that he's able to make, especially to a guy like Rudy Gobert, who he usually plays with, who can snatch those passes out of wild locations. And he elevates way over guys. Like, for his height, he's able to elevate and meet 7-footers in that sort of like floater range and easily have an open look at the basket. So that's where I'm veering towards, is Tony Jones' opinion that in lieu of those step backs, if we're going to have that same usage, Dan, from Jordan, like I don't think we're going to get what you prefer, which is other players finishing the possession. I mean, but if he's able to turn those way wild 3-point shots into drives, I think he plays enough with Gobert that Gobert can either clean it up or he's going to pass it to him, or Jordan's going to get a better shot. And that's what I think the shot profile looks like. I don't necessarily think I want his usage to go down, or that I care about that. I don't care about the wildest shots.
No, yeah, and to be clear, like, I don't care about his usage. I care about the combination, the relationship between his usage and his efficiency. But to your point, here's what happened tonight, and we can say this to let's bring a positive light to the Jordan Clarkson discussion, because we are breaking down a game in which he just had 20 points. So
I think it's a good game to analyze because he's starting to come around, and it's good to say, like, okay, what happened tonight that we didn't see before? What Jordan Clarkson are we getting now?
Well, and here's what's funny about tonight. Like, his first 2 or 3 shots, I'd have to go back and look at the play-by-play, but I think it was his first 3 shots were the kind of, like, I think I'm Steph Curry, fading, contested,
they
leaning
weren't
one
good.
direction.
They weren't
They
good,
were not
man.
good shots. And then you know what he did? The next 2 times he had the ball, he took it inside, and he got those little, I don't even know what to call them, because they're, like, not quite floaters, but they're not quite layups. They're kind of like,
they're jump push shots. They're like Tim Tebow jump passes. He rises up and
he gets in there and he, like, jumps right over the 7-footer, like you're saying, and just kind of like push shots them in. And then his next shot was a play where Donovan Mitchell broke down the defense and Jordan Clarkson got a kick out 3 where his feet were set. And I knew before he even let go of it that it was going to go in, right? So that's the thing with Jordan is usually if he can find his confidence that sort of way, then I feel a little bit better about the dam breaking. So I think from that point on, I believe he had missed 3 threes up until that catch and shoot from Donovan, which means from that point forward, he went 4 of 9 for the night, so 44%, right? So if he will just kind of let it start happening for him first, then usually that kind of sets him on a better path and a better rhythm. He's not. So in the NBA, there's 2 types of shooters, right? There's stroke shooters and streak shooters. Stroke shooters are guys like Kyle Korver, who every shot they've ever taken looks the exact same, and it's the reason why generally if you take any sample of 20 consecutive shots, they will have made 9 of them, right? They're just that good and that consistent that there's not a huge. And then there's like the CJ Mileses and the guys who are capable of going
Skyline
like
High School CJ Miles.
Yeah. Let's bring it back to Dallas native CJ Miles, who can have a 1 for 10 stretch and then hit 8 out of their next 10 from 3, right? And Jordan Clarkson is that kind of shooter. He's a kind of guy who, when he's feeling it, he's feeling it, and when he's not feeling it, he's not feeling it. So just let it come to you a little bit and find your rhythm and work your way into the game that way. And then once you have it, then I think there's a little bit more. Like, I don't hear anybody complaining about that one terrible bogey heat check 3 in the fourth quarter because he had just made like 3 of them in a row. So like, yeah, sure, have at it, Bojan, right? And I think that's the thing is there are some players who are good enough to have their confidence show up before the results have shown up, and but those guys usually are in MVP races. I would like for. I think Clarkson did a great job tonight of adjusting his game after it wasn't working early, and really turning around his night because he was willing to do that and to kind of let things come to him a different way instead of just continuing to force up contested, fading, off-balance threes.
For sure. I think we're about to see a good Jordan Clarkson streak, and I think we're about to see a good Utah Jazz streak. I've commented about
from your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah, I've talked about the loss of the Magic as being like it's really not that bad to lose to the Magic early in the season. Like I like that team. They got some players with verve. Franz Wagner's playing great. Mo Bamba's playing great. Wendell Carter's playing great. Cole Anthony's playing out of his fucking mind. The loss of the Pacers I didn't like, but like they have players. Like that's a real NBA team coached by Rick Carlisle. The loss of the Heat without Jimmy Butler, that sucked. I think shooting was one thing you could look to as like kind of lost that one. But handily beating the Sixers at home, I think is a good start to. I'm going to get into the schedule now a little bit. Is playing the Raptors on Thursday, 7:00 tip. Good team in the Raptors, like a lot of their players. Pascal Siakam is back and he's playing well. OG Anunoby's playing out of his mind. Scotty Barnes is looking to be runner-up for Rookie of the Year right now.
And another team, by the way, that just I won't make a meal out of this, but like they're just another team that kind of does some things differently, right? So they might not be the best pure talent test that the Jazz will face in the upcoming stretch of games, but they're a team that will just test them in different ways because they're aggressive, they're switchy, they're active. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. It's the next game, so just to make an appetizer out of it, gonna need Rudy Gobert big time in that game because Ken Birch isn't playing well, Chris Boucher isn't playing well, and so they're really relying on their two power forward, small forward types in Siakam and Anunoby, which is a size matchup that disadvantages Utah. So it's going to be Rudy Gobert needing to feast. It's going to have to be a Rudy Gobert night, I think. Also, but they don't really have anyone to really guard Donovan Mitchell. Fred VanVleet is a good defender, but I think you see him on Conley, and if he is on Mitchell, he's not big enough, I think, for what Mitchell can do. At the Kings, that's a big mystery. Every one of the Kings is playing like shit except for Harrison Barnes, who's having the year of his life. Home against the Grizzlies, and then at the Thunder, and then home against the reeling Pelicans 2 nights in a row, Friday, Saturday, 26th and 27th, before our next live post-game against the Trailblazers on Monday, November 29th. So I'm looking at this schedule here, right, and the recent home losses to the Pacers and the Heat obviously give you pause. But yes, the Jazz should beat the Raptors at home. Yes, the Jazz should beat the Grizzlies at home. Yes, the Jazz should beat the Kings wherever you want to play the fucking Kings.
Although you never, by then you could be facing a Kings team that's in a honeymoon period with a new coach because it sounds like Luke Walton's seat is getting even hotter.
So Luke Walton will not be fired. I keep saying this on the internet and everywhere else.
All right.
Luke Walton is not going to be fired because his contract is fully guaranteed for the year, and ownership does not want to pay for two coaches because when you bring in an interim coach on, remember this with the Bulls interim coach situation. When you bring in an interim head coach, it's usually standard practice and no one bristles at them asking for a pay raise for their interim coaching period, and they almost always receive it. Ownership would have fired Luke Walton if his contract was not fully guaranteed. It's going to be like 10 games left in the season before they fire him. They are not going to fire Luke Walton until they get their money's worth. It's this weird limbo situation. That's my weird belief.
I mean, I'm saying it tongue-in-cheekly. I don't really think he's going to be fired by Saturday. I think I think what's way more likely that happens on Saturday is that the Jazz catch the Kings in this period where the players are responding to the rumors and going, oh, you mean if we don't play that hard, we might get a new voice in the locker room soon? So, which that can go the other way too, by the way. Like, the Bucks heard that Mike Budenholzer's feet was warm, and they played out of their minds and won a championship to save his job. I don't think the Kings probably feel that same way about Luke Walton. So, I'm just saying that the emotional dynamic.
Does anybody feel that strongly about Bill Walton? I'm not sure Bill Walton's, or I haven't said Bill Walton. Luke Walton's family feels that strongly about him. Even Bill Walton's like, buddy, just retire and get into broadcasting. It's done wonders.
You've made your money, man. You've made it. Like, just come join me at the Grateful Dead concerts, and I hear you.
Utah is a much more interesting December, so let's get back on the right track with the shooting. Feel better about the Wilson ball, whatever it is, and we'll get back on track. I just want to bridge the Jordan Clarkson discussion and to say, like, I think we're going to see some better shooting, if not from him, but certainly from the rest of the team over these next few games. Nothing like games against the Thunder and the Pelicans I feel so sad about. But they're bad, and we will kick their ass. So, although, hey, Jonas Valanciunas has a way of getting Rudy in foul trouble, but again, the Pelicans don't have a way of anything else. Brandon Ingram has never really been... He's occasionally, but never really been a consistent problem. So the schedule looks good for Utah. It should be good. But that Blazers game, Monday, November 29th, I'm excited we're doing a postcast for it because that'll be a bellwether game for both teams. Looking to say, like, where are we going where we should be in the Western Conference? And the Trailblazers have had an interesting season themselves. And Damian Lillard, maybe it's a Wilson ball affecting him, but he's also starting to come into form. So perhaps that Jazz game could be a coming out party. So we'll have a lot to talk about that day.
And that game's a home game too, as is the next one against the Celtics. So, I mean, I think you're right. I think the Jazz are heading into a sort of one of those just what the doctor ordered stretches. And there's nothing more just what the doctor ordered than, a Philly team that's down 2 all-stars and down 4 rotation players. And, luckily the Jazz took care of business. So.
Yeah. Well, Dan, this has been a treat. I figure we hit our mark for talking about a 25-point win. I said 35-point earlier because I forgot how to do math for a second. But Jazz get a dominating victory over a very depleted 76ers team. Gobert dominant defensively, both interior and on the perimeter guarding. Bojan and Jordan both found their shot relatively. Donovan didn't have to do much, and we got a great win. Looking forward to Thursday playing against the Raptors. Frisky Raptors team. Again, no Kyle Lowry, who's now with Miami, as we well know. But Pascal Siakam is back, and they got a promising rookie in Scotty Barnes. Should be an interesting matchup at home for Utah coming up on Thursday. And we'll catch you on November 29th after a few cake games that hopefully Utah wins against the Trailblazers. Have a good night.
Take it easy.